Hi, hello my dear YouTube friends, how are you doing today? And welcome to another fairy tale story from my little room here. I hope you're doing well this Saturday. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Mia. I am 43 years old and I live in Denmark with my husband and 4 kitties. And I really hope that you'll consider subscribing to my channel. I would love that. And you'll find a subscribe button right down there. Next to it, you will find a bell. If you ding that and choose all, you'll be notified whenever I put up a new video. And if you're back, hi friends, welcome back. I'm so happy to see you. And sorry, I'm still fighting the yawning from my new medication. But yeah, you know what we're going to do. You know I'm going to read the fairy tale, and this one is a longer one. And as always, I'm going to be looking down because I'm reading the fairy tale off of my phone. And we go again here. I had hoped that this had disappeared by now, but apparently not. But let's get into it, okay? This one is called The Dryad. We are traveling to Paris to the exhibition. Now we are there. That was a journey, a flight without magic. We flew on the wings of steam, over the sea and across the land. Yes, our time is the time of fairy tales. We are in the midst of Paris, in a great hotel, blooming flowers, ornaments, the staircases, and soft carpets the floors. Our room is a very cozy one, and through the open balcony door we have a view of the great square. Spring lives down there. It has come to Paris and arrived in the same time with us. It has come in the shape of a glorious young chestnut tree, with delicate leaves newly opened. How the tree gleams, dressed in its spring garb, before all the other trees in the place. One of the latter had been struck out of the list of living trees. It lies on the ground with roots exposed. On the place where it stood, the young chestnut tree is to be planted and to flourish. It still stands towering aloft on the heavy wagon which has brought it in this morning, a distance of several miles to Paris. For years it had stood there, in the protecting of a mighty oak tree, under which the old venerable clergyman had often sat with children listening to his story. The young chestnut tree had also listened to the stories, for the Dryad who lived in it was a child also. She remembered the time when the tree was so little that it only projected a short way above the grass and ferns around. These were as tall as they would ever be, but the tree grew every year and enjoyed the air and sunshine and drank the dew and the rain. Several times it was also, as it must be, well shaken by the wind and the rain, for that is part of education. The Dryad rejoiced in her life and rejoiced in the sunshine and the singing of the birds, but she was most rejoiced at human voices. She understood the language of men as well as she understood that of animals. Butterflies, cockchafers, dragonflies, everything that could fly came to pay a visit. They could all talk. They told of the village, of the vineyard and of the forest, of the old castle with its parks and canals and ponds. Down in the water dwelt also living beings, which in their way could fly under the water from one place to another. Beings with knowledge and delineations. They said nothing at all. They were so clever. And the swallow who had dived told about the pretty little goldfish, of the thick turbot, the fat brill, and the old carp. The swallow could describe all that very well. But self is the man, she said. One ought to see these things oneself. But how was the Dryad ever to see such things? She was obliged to be satisfied with being able to look over the beautiful country and see the busy industry of men. It was glorious, but most glorious of all, when the old clergyman sat under the oak tree and talked of France, of the other great deeds of his sons and daughters, whose name will be mentioned with admiration through all time. Then the Dryad heard of the shepherd girl, Joan of Arc, and of Charlotte Corday. She heard about Henry IV and Napoleon I. She heard names whose echo sounded in the heart of the people. The village children listened attentively, and the Dryad no less attentively. She became a school child with the rest. In the clouds that went sailing by, she saw picture by picture everything that she heard talked about. The cloudy sky was a picture book. She felt so happy in beautiful France, the fruitful land of genius, with the cradle of freedom, but in her heart the sting remained that the bird, that every animal that could fly was much better off than she. Even the fly could look about more than the world, far beyond the Dryad's horizon. France was so great and so glorious, but she could only look at a little piece of it. The land stretched out worldwide, with vineyards, forests, and great cities. Of all these, Paris was the most splendid and the mightiest. The bird could get there, but she never. Among the village children was a little ragged, poor girl, but a pretty one to look at. She was always laughing or singing and twining red flowers in her black hair. "Don't go to Paris," the old clergyman warned her. "Poor child, if you go there, it will be your ruin." But she went for all that. The Dryad often thought of her, for she had the same wish and felt the same longing for the great city. The Dryad's tree was bearing its first chestnut blossoms. The bird went twittering around them in the most beautiful sunshine. Then a stately carriage came rolling along that way, and in it sat a grand lady driving the spirited, light-footed horses. On the back sat a smart little groom balancing it himself. The Dryad knew the lady, and the old clergyman knew her too. He shook his head gravely when he saw her and said, "So you went there after all, and this was your ruin. Poor Mary." "That one poor," thought the Dryad. No, she wears a dress fit for a countess. She had become one in the city of magic changes. Oh, if I were only there, amidst all the splendor and pomp. They shine up into the very clouds at night. When I look up, I can tell in what direction the town lies. Toward that direction the Dryad looked every evening. She saw in the dark night the gleaming cloud of the horizon. In the clear moonlight night she missed the sailing clouds, which showed her pictures of the city and pictures from history. The child grasped at the picture book. The child grasped at the picture book. The Dryad grasped at the cloud world, her thought book. A sudden cloudless sky was for her a blank leaf, and for several days she had only had such leaves before her. It was in a warm summertime. Not a breeze moved through the glowing hot day. Every leaf, every flower lay, as it were, torpid, and the people seemed torpid too. Then the clouds arose, and covering the region round about where the gleaming mist announced, "Here lies Paris." The clouds piled themselves up like a chain of mountains, hurried on through the air, and spread themselves abroad over the whole landscape as far as the Dryad's eye could reach. Like enormous blue-black blocks of rock, the clouds lay piled over one another. Gleams of lightning shot forth from them. "These also are the servants of the Lord God," said the old clergyman, as the old clergyman had said. And there came a bluish, dazzling flash of light, a lightning up as if the sun itself, which could burst blocks of rock asunder. The lightning struck and split to the roots of an old venerable oak. The crown fell asunder. It seemed as if the tree was stretching forth its arms to clasp the messengers of the light. No bronze cannon can sound over the land as the birth of a royal child, as the thunder sounded at the death of an old oak. The rain streamed down, a refreshing wind was blowing. The storm had gone by, and there was quite a holiday glow over all things. The old clergyman spoke a few words for the honorable remembrance, and the painter made a drawing as of lasting record of the tree. "Everything passes away," said the Dryad, "passes away like a cloud and never comes back." The old clergyman, too, did not come back. The green roof of his school was gone, and his teaching chair had vanished. The children did not come back, but autumn came, and winter came, and then spring also. In all this change of seasons, the Dryad looked toward the region where at night Paris gleamed with its bright mist on the horizon. Forth from the town rushed engine after engine, train after train, whistling and screaming at all hours of the day. In the evening, towards midnight, at daybreak, and all the day through came the trains. Out of each one and into each one streamed people from the country of every king. A new wonder of the world had summoned them to Paris. In what form does this wonder exhibit itself? "A splendid blossom of art and industry," said one, "has unfolded itself in the Champ du Mars, a giant sunflower from whose petal one can learn geography and statistics, and one can become as wise as the Lord Mayor, and raise oneself to the level of art and poetry, and study the greatness and power of the various lands." "A fairy-tale flower," said another, "a many-colored lotus plant which spreads out its green leaves like a velvet carpet over the sand. The opening spring has brought it forth. The summer will see in all its splendor. The autumn winds will sweep it away, and so that not a leaf, not a fragment of its root shall remain." In front of the military school extends in time of peace the area of war, a field without a blade of grass, a piece of sandy steppe, as if cut out of the desert of Africa, where Fata Morgana displays her wondrous airy castles and hanging gardens. In the Champ du Mars, however, these were to be seen more splendid, more wonderful than in the East, for human art had converted this airy deceptive scenes into reality. The Aladdin's palace of the present had been built, it was said. Day by day, hour by hour, it unfolds more of its wonderful splendor. The endless hall shines in marble and many colors. Master Bloodless here moves his limbs of steel and iron in the great circular hall of machinery. Works of art in metal, in stone, in gobelins, tapestry, announce the vitality of mind that is stirring in every land. Halls of paintings, splendor of flowers, everything that the mind and skill can create in workshops of the artisan had been placed here for show. Even the memorials of ancient days, out of old graves and turf moors, have appeared at this general meeting. The overpowering, great variegated whole must be divided into small portions and pressed together like a plaything, if it is to be understood and described. Like a great table of Christmas Eve, the Champ du Mars carried a wonder castle of industry and art, and around the knickknacks from all countries had been ranged, knickknacks on the grand scale, for every nation found some remembrance of home. Here stood the royal palace of Egypt, there the caravanserai of desert land. The Bedouin had quitted his sunny country and hastened by on his camel. There stood the Russian stables with the fiery, glorious horses of the steppe. Here stood the simple straw-thatched dwelling of the Danish peasant, with the Dannebrog flag next to Gustavus Vasa's wooden house from Delarney, with its wonderful carvings, American huts, English cottages, French pavilions, kiosks, theaters, churches, all strewn around, and between them the fresh green turfs, the clear springing water, blooming bushes, rare trees, hothouses, in which one might fancy oneself transported into the tropical forest, whole gardens brought from Damascus and blooming under one roof. What colors, what fragrance! Artificial grottos surrounded bodies of fresh or salt water and gave a glimpse into the empires of the fishes. The visitors seemed to wander at the bottom of the sea among fishes and polypi. All this, they said, the Champ de Mars office. Around the great, richly spread table, the crowd of human beings moved like a busy swarm of ants, on foot or in the little carriages, for not all feats are equal to such a fatiguous journey. Hither they swarm from morning till late in the evening. Streamer after streamer, crowded with people, glides down the Seine. The number of carriages is continually under increase. The swarm of people on foot and on horseback grows more and more dense. Carriages and omnibuses are crowded, stuffed, and embroidered with people. All these tributary streams flow in one direction towards the exhibition. On every entrance the flag of France is displayed. Around the world's bazaar wave the flags of all nations. There is a humming and a murmuring from the hall of the machines. From the towers the melodies of the chimes is heard. With the tones of the organs in the churches mingle the hoarse nasal songs from the cafes of the East. It is a kingdom of Babel, a wonder of the world. In very truth it was. That's what all the reporters said, and who did not hear them? The Dryad knew everything that is told here of the new wonder in the cities of cities. "Fly away, you birds, fly away to sea, and then come back and tell me," said the Dryad. The wish became an intense desire, became the one thought of a life. Then, in the quiet, silent night, while the full moon was shining, the Dryad saw a spark fly out of the moon's disk and fall like a shooting star. And before the tree, whose leaves waved to and fro as if they were stirred by a tempest, stood a noble mighty, a grand figure, in tones that were once rich and strong, like the trumpet of the last judgment, bidding farewell to life and summoning to the great account. It said, "Thou shalt go to the city of magic, thou shalt take roots there and enjoy the mighty rushing breeze, the air and the sunshine there. But the time of thy life shall then be shortened. The line of years that awaited thee here amid the free nature shall shrink but to a small tale. Poor Dryad, it shall be thy destruction. Thy yearning and longing will increase, thy desire will grow more stormy, the tree itself will be as a prison to thee. Thou wilt quit by thy cell and give up thy nature to fly out and mingle amongst men. Then the years that would have been belonged to the tree will be contracted to half the span of the emperor fly that lives by a day, one night, and thy life tabor shall be blown out. The leaves of the tree will wither and be blown away to become green never again." Thus the words sounded, and the light vanished away, but not the longing of the Dryad. She trembled in the wild fever of expectation. "I shall go there," she cried rejoicingly. "Life is beginning and swells like a cloud. Nobody knows whither it is hastening." When the grey dawn arose and the moon returned pale and the clouds were tinted red, the wished-for hour struck. The words of promise were fulfilled. People appeared with spades and poles. They dug round the roots of the tree, deeper and deeper, and beneath it a wagon was brought out, drawn by many horses, and the tree was lifted up with its roots and lumps of earth that adhered to them. Matting was placed around the roots, as though the tree had its feet in a warm bag. And now the tree was lifted on the wagon and secured with chains. The journey began, the journey to Paris. There the tree was to grow as an ornament to the city of French glory. The twigs and the leaves of the chestnut tree trembled in its first moment of its being moved, and the Dryad trembled in the pleasurable feeling of expectation. Away! Away! It sounded in every beat of her pulse. Away! Away! Sounded in the words that flew trembling along. The Dryad forgot to bid farewell to the regions of home. She thought not of the waving grass and of the innocent daisies which had looked up to her as to a great lady, a young princess playing at being a shepherdess, out of the open air. The chestnut tree stood upon the wagon and nodded its branches, whether this meant farewell or forward. The Dryad knew not. She dreamed only of the marvelous new things that seemed yet so familiar and that were to unfold themselves before her. No child's heart rejoicing in innocence, no heart whose blood danced with passion, had set out on the journey to Paris more full of expectation than she. Her farewell sounded in the words, "Away! Away!" The wheels turned, the distance approached, the present vanished. The region was changed, even as the clouds changed. New vineyards, forests, villages, villas appeared, came nearer, vanished. The chestnut tree moved forward, and the Dryad went with it. Stream engine after stream engine rushed past, sending up into the air vapory clouds that formed figures which told of Paris, whence they came and whither the Dryad was going. Everything around knew it, and must know whither she was bound. It seemed to her as if every tree she passed stretched out its leaf toward her with a prayer, "Take me with you, take me with you," for every tree enclosing a longing Dryad. What changes during this flight? Houses seems to be rising out of the earth, more and more, thicker and thicker. The chimneys rose like flower pots ranged side by side, or in rows one above the other. On the roofs, The chimneys rose like flower pots ranged side by side, or in rows one above another. On the roofs, great inscriptions in letter a yard long and figures in various colors covering the walls from cornice to basement came brightly out. "Where does Paris begin, and where shall I be there?" asked the Dryad. The crowd of people grew, the tumult and bustle increased. Carriage followed upon carriage. People on foot and people on horsebacks were mingled together. All around were shops on shops, music and song, crying and talking. The Dryad in her tree was now in the midst of Paris. The great heavy wagon all at once stopped in a little square planted with trees. The high house around had all of them balconies to the windows from which the inhabitants looked down upon the young fresh chestnut tree, which was coming to be planted here as a substitute for the dead tree that lay stretched on the ground. The passers-by stood still and smiled in admiration of its pure vernal freshness. The older trees, whose buds were still closed, whispered with their waving branches, "Welcome, welcome!" The fountain, throwing its jet of water high up in the air to let it fall again in the wide stone basin, told the winds to sprinkle the newcomer with pearly drops, as if it wished to give him a refreshing draught to welcome him. The Dryad felt how her tree was being lifted from the wagon to be placed in the spot where it was to stand. The roots were covered with earth, and fresh turf was laid on top. Blooming shrubs and flowers in pots were ranged around, and thus a little garden arose in the square. The tree had been killed by the fumes of gas, the streams of kitchens, and of bad air of the city, was put upon the wagon and driven away. The passers-by looked on. Children and old men sat upon the bench and looked at the green tree. And we who were telling the story stood upon a balcony and looked down upon the green spring sight that had been brought in from the fresh country air, and said what the old clergyman would have said, "Poor Dryad." I am happy, said the Dryad cried, rejoicing, and yet I cannot realize, cannot describe what I feel. Everything is as I fancied it, and yet I did not fancy it. The houses stood there, so lofty, so close. The sunlight shone on only one of the walls, and that one was struck over with bills and placards, before which the people stood still, and this made a crowd. Carriages rushed past, carriages sailed past, light ones and heavy ones mingled together, omnibuses whose overcrowded moving houses came rattling by. Horsemen galloped amongst them, and even carts and wagons asserted their rights. The Dryad asked herself if these high-grown houses, which stood so close around her, would not remove and take other shapes, like the clouds in the sky, and draw aside, so that she might cast a glance into Paris, and over it Notre Dame must show itself, and the Vendome column, and the wondrous building which he had called and was still calling so many strangers to the city. But the houses did not stir from their places. It was yet day when the lamps were lit. The gas jets gleamed from the shops and shone even into the branches of the trees, so that it was like sunlight in summer. The stars above made their appearance, the same to which the Dryad had looked up in her home. She thought she felt a clear, pure stream of air which went forth from them. She felt herself lifted up and strengthened, and felt an increased power of seeing through every leaf and through every fibre of the root. Amid all the noise and the turmoil, the colours and the lights, she knew herself watched by a mild eye. From this side street sounded a merry note of fiddlers and wind instruments. Up to the dance, and to the dance, up to the dance, to jollity and pleasure. That was their invitation. Such music it was. The horses, carriages, trees, and horses would have danced, if they had known how. The charm of intoxicating delight filled the bosom of the Dryad. How glorious, how splendid it is, she cried rejoicingly. Now I am in Paris. The next day that dawned, the next night that fell, offered the same spectacle, similar bustle, similar life, changing indeed, yet always the same, and thus it went on through the sequence of days. Now I know every tree, every flower on the square here. I know every house, every balcony, every shop in this narrow cut-off corner, where I am denied the sight of this great mighty city. Where are the arches of triumphs, the boulevards, the wondrous building of the world? I see nothing of all this. As if shut up in a cage, I stand among the high houses, which I now know by heart, with their inscriptions, signs, and placards, all of the painted confectionery that is no longer to my taste. Where are all the things of which I heard, for which I longed, and for whose sake I wanted to come hither? What have I ceased fun? What have I ceased fun? Found one? I feel like this. I feel the same longing I felt before. I feel that there is a life I should wish to grasp and to experience. I must go out into the ranks of living men and mingle among them. I must fly about like a bird. I must see and feel and become human altogether. I must enjoy the one half day instead of vegetating for years in everyday sameness and weariness, in which I become ill, and at last sink and disappear like the dew on the meadows. I will gleam like the cloud, gleam in the sunshine of life, look out over the whole like the cloud, and pass away like it. No one knoweth whither. Thus sighed the Dryad, and she prayed, Take from me the years that was destined for me, and give me but half of the life of the emerald fly. Deliver me from my prison. Give me human life, human happiness, only a short span, only the one night, if it cannot be otherwise, and then punish me for my wish to live, my longing for life. Strike me out of thy list. Let my shell, the fresh young tree, wither or be hewn down, and burned to ashes and scattered into all the winds. A rustling went through the leaves of the tree. There was a trembling of each of the leaves. It seemed as if fire streamed through it. A gust of wind shook its green crown, and from the midst of that crown, a female figure came forth. In the same moment she was sitting beneath the brightly illuminated leafy branches, young and beautiful to behold, like poor Mary, to whom the clergyman had said, "In the great city will be thy destruction." The Dryad sat at the foot of the tree, at her house door, which she had locked and whose key had thrown away. So young, so fair, the stars saw her and blinked at her. The gas lamp saw her and gleamed and beckoned to her. How delicate she was, and yet how blooming, a child and yet a grown maiden. Her dress was fine as silk, green as the freshly opened leaves on the crown of the tree. In her nut-brown hair clung a half-opened chestnut bloom. She looked like the goddess of spring. For one short minute she sat motionless. Then she sprang up, and light as a gazelle she hurried away. She ran and sprang like the reflection from the mirror that, carried by the sunshine, it cast now here, now there. Could anyone have followed her with his eyes, he would have seen how marvelously her dress and her form changed according to the nature of the house or the place whose light happened to shine upon her. She reached the boulevards. Here a sea of light streamed forth from the gas flames of the lamps, the shops and the cafes. Here stood in a row young and slender trees, each of which concealed its Dryad and gave shade from the artificial sunlight. The whole vast pavement was one great festival hall, where covered tables stood laden with refreshment of all kinds, from champagne to chartreuse down to coffee and beer. Here was an exhibition of flowers, statues, books, and colored stuffs. From the crowd close by the lofty houses she looked forth over the terrific stream beyond the rows of trees. Yonder heaved a stream of rolling carriages, cabriolets, coaches, omnibuses, cabs, and amongst them ridden gentlemen and marching troops. To cross to the opposite shore was an undertaking fraught with danger to life and limb. Now lanterns shed their radiance abroad. Now the gas had the upper hand. Suddenly a rocket rised. Whence? Whither? Here are sounds of soft Italian melodies yonder. Spanish songs are sung, accompanied by the rattle of these castanets, but strongest of all, the predominating over the rest, the street organ tunes of the moment, the exciting cancan music, which Orpheus never knew, and which was never heard by the belle Helene. Even the barrow was tempted to hop upon one of its wheels. The Dryad danced, floated, flew, changing her color every moment like a hummingbird in the sunshine. Each house with its world belonging to it gave her its own reflections. As the growing lotus flower torn from its stem, it carried away by the stream. So the Dryad drifted along. Whenever she paused, she was another being, so that none was able to follow her, to recognize her, or to look more closely at her. Like cloud pictures, all things flew by her. She looked into the thousand faces, but not one was familiar to her. She saw not a single form from home. Two bright eyes had remained in her memory. She thought of Mary, poor Mary, the ragged Mary child, who wore the red flowers in her black hair. Mary was now here in the world city, rich and magnificent as in the day when she drove past the house of the old clergyman and past the tree of the Dryad, the old oak. Here she was certainly living in the deafening tumult. Perhaps she had just stepped out of one of the gorgeous carriages in waiting, handsome equipages with coachmen in gold braid and footmen in silken hose drove up. The people who alighted from them were all richly dressed ladies. They went through the open gates and ascended the broad staircases that led to a building resting on marble pillars. Was this building perhaps the wonder of the world? There Mary would certainly be found. Santa Maria resounded from the interior. Incense floated through the lofty painting and gilded aisle, where a solemn twilight reigned. It was the Church of the Madeleine. Clad in black garments of the most costly stuff, fashioned accordingly to the latest mode, the rich, feminine world of Paris glided across the shining pavement. The crest of the proprietors were engraved on the silver shields onto the velvet-bound prayer books, and embroidered in the corners of perfume handkerchiefs bordered with Brussels lace. A few of the ladies were kneeling in silent prayer before the altar. Others resorted to the confessionals. Anxiety and fear took possession of the Dryad. She felt as if she had entered a place where she had no right to be. Here was the abode of silence, the hall of secrets. Everything was said in whispers. Every word was a mystery. The Dryad saw herself enveloped in lace and silk, like the women of wealth and of high birth around her. Had perhaps every one of them a longing in her breast, like the Dryad? A deep, painful sigh was heard. Did it escape from some confessional in the distant corner, or from the bottom of the Dryad? She drew the veil closer around her. She breathed incense, and not the fresh air. Here was not the abiding place of her longing. Away, away, a hastening without rest. The imperial fly knows not repose, for her existence is flight. She was out again, among the gas candelabra by a magnificent fountain. All its streaming waters are not able to wash out in the innocent blood what was spilled here. Such were the words spoken. Strangers stood around, carrying on a lively conversation such as no one would have dared to carry on in the gorgeous hall of the secret whence the Dryad came. A heavy stone slab was turned and then lifted. She did not understand why. She saw an opening that led into the depths below. The strangers stepped down, leaving the starlit air and the cheerful life of the upper world behind them. "I am afraid," said one of the women who stood around to her husband. "I cannot venture to go down, nor do I care for the wonders down yonder. You had better stay here with me." "Indeed, and travel home," said the man, "and quit Paris without having seen the most wonderful thing of all, the real wonder of the present period, created by the power and resolution of one man." "I will not go down for all that," was the reply. The wonder of the present time, it had been called. The Dryad had heard and had understood it. The goal of her ardent longing had thus been reached, and here was the entrance to it. Down into the depths below Paris. She had not thought of such a thing, but now she heard it said and saw the strangers descending and went after them. The staircase was of cast iron, spiral, broad, and easy. Below there burned a lamp, and farther down another. They stood in a labyrinth of endless halls and arched passages, all communicated with each other. All the streets and lanes of Paris were to be seen here again. As in a dim reflection, the names were painted up, and every house above had its number down here also, and struck its roots under the macadamianized quays of broad canal, in which the muddy water flowed onward. Over its fresh streaming water was carried on arches, and quite at the top hung the tangled net of gas pipes and telegraph wires. In the distance, lamps gleamed like a reflection from the world city above. Every now and then a dull rumbling was heard. This came from the heavy wagons rolling over the entrance bridges. Whither had the Dryad come? You have no doubt heard of the catacombs. Now they are vanishing points in that new underground world. That wonder of the present day, the sewers of Paris. The Dryad was there, and not in the world's exhibition in the Champ de Mars. She heard exclamation of wonder and admiration. From here go forth health and life for thousands upon thousands up yonder. Our time is the time of progress, with its manifold blessings. Such was the opinion and the speech of men, but not of those creatures who had been born here, and who builds and dwells here, of the rats, namely, who were squeakingly to one another in the clefts of a crumbling wall, quite plainly, and in a way that Dryad understood well. A big old fatter rat, with its tail bitten off, was relieving his feelings in a loud squeak, and his family gave the tribute of concurrence to every word he said. "I am disgusted with this man mewing," he cried, "with these outbursts of ignorance. A fine magnificence, truly, all made up of gas and petroleum. I can't eat such stuff as that. Everything here is so fine and bright now, that one's ashamed of itself without exactly knowing why. Ah, if we only lived in the days of tallow candles, and it does not lie so very far behind us. That was a romantic time, as one may say." "What are you talking of there?" asked the Dryad. "I have never seen you before. What is it if you are talking about?" "Of the glorious days that are gone," said the rat, "of the happy times of our great-grandfathers and great-grandmothers. Then it was a great thing to get down here. That was a rat's nest quite different from Paris. Mother Plague used to live here then. She killed people, but never rats. Robbers and smugglers could breathe freely here. Here was the meeting place of the most interesting personages whom one now only gets to see in the theaters where they act melodrama up above. The time of romance is gone even in our rat's nest, and here also fresh air and petroleum have broken in." Thus squeaked the rat. He squeaked in honor of the old time when Mother Plague was still alive. A carriage stopped, a kind of open omnibus, drawn by swift horses. The company mounted and drove away along the Boulevard de Sebastopol. There, that is to say, the underground boulevard over which the well-known crowded street of that name extended. The carriage disappeared in the twilight. The Dryad disappeared, lifted to the cheerful freshness above. Here and not below, in the vaulted passages filled with heavy air, the wonder works must be found, which she was to seek in her short lifetime. It must gleam brighter than all of the gas flames, stronger than the moon that was just gliding past. Yes, certainly, she saw it yonder in the distance. It gleamed before her, and twinkled and glittered like the evening star in the sky. She saw a glittering portal open that led to a little garden where all was brightness and music dance. Colored lamps surrounded little lakes in which were water plants of colored metal, from whose flower jets of water spurted up. Beautiful weeping willows, real products of spring, hung their fresh branches over these lakes like a fresh green, transparent and yet screening veil. In the bushes burned an open fire, throwing a red twilight over the quiet huts of branches, into which the sound of music penetrated, an ear-tickling, intoxicating music that sent the blood coursing through the veins. Beautiful girls in festive attire, with pleasant smiles on their lips, and the light spirit of youth in their hearts. Marys with roses in their hair, but without carriages and postilions, flitted to and fro in the wild dance. Where were the heads? Where's the feet? As if stung by tarantulas, they sprang, laughed, rejoiced, as if in their ecstasies they were going to embrace all the world. The Dryad felt herself torn with them into the whirl of the dance. Round her delicate foot clung the silken boat, chestnut brown in color, like the ribbon that floated from her hair down upon her bare shoulders. The green silk dress waved in large folds, but did not entirely hide the pretty foot and ankle. Had she come to the enchanted garden of Armida? What was the name of this place? The name glittered in the gas jets over the entrance. It was Mabille. The soaring upward of rockets, the splashing of fountains, and the popping of champagne corks accompanying the wild bacchantic dance. Over the whole gilded the moon through the air, clear, but with a somewhat crooked face. A wild joviality seemed to rush through the Dryad, as though she were intoxicated with opium. Her eyes spoke, her lips spoke, but the sound of violins and of the flute drowned the sound of her voice. Her partner whispered words to her which she did not understand, nor do we understand them. He stretched out his arms to draw her to him, but he embraced only the empty air. The Dryad had been carried away like a rose leaf on the wind. Before her she saw a flame in the air, a flashing light bright up in a tower. The beacon light shone from the goal of her longing, shone from the red lighthouse, tower of the Fata Morgana of the Jean Dumas. Thither then she was carried by the wind. She circled round the towers. The workmen thought it was a butterfly that had come too early, and that now sank down dying. The moon shone bright. Gas lamps spread light around, and through the halls, over the old-world buildings, scattered about over the rose hills and the rockets produced by human ingenuity, from which waterfalls, driven by the power of Master Bloodless, fell down. The caverns of the sea, the depths of the lakes, the kingdom of the fishes were opened here. Men walked as in the depth of the deep pond, and held converse with the sea in the diving bell of glass. The water pressed against the strong glass walls above and on every side. The polypi, eel-like living creatures, had fastened themselves to the bottom, and stretched out arms fathoms long for prey. A big turbot was making himself broad in front, quietly enough, but not without casting some suspicious glances aside. A crab clambered over him, looking like a giant spider, while the shrimps wandered about in a restless haste, like the butterflies and moths of the sea. In the fresh water grew water lilies, nymphea, and reeds. The goldfishes stood up below in rank and file, all turning their heads one way, that the streaming water might flow into their mouths. Fat carp stared at the glass wall with stupid eyes. They knew that they were here to be exhibited, and that they had made this somewhat toilsome journey hither in tubs filled with water, and they thought with dismay of the land sickness from which they had suffered so cruelty on the railway. They had come to see the exhibition, and now contemplated it from their fresh or saltwater position. They looked attentively at the crowds of people who passed by them, early and late. All the nations in the world, they thought, had made an exhibition of their inhabitants, for the edification of soles and haddocks, pike and carp, that they might give their opinions upon the different kinds. "Those are scaly animals," said a little slimy woman. "They put on different scales 2 or 3 times a day, and they emit sounds which they call speaking. We don't put on scales. We are and we make ourselves understood in the easiest way, simply by twitching the corners of our mouth and staring with our eyes. We have a great many advantages over mankind. But they have learned swimming of us, remarked a well-educated codling. You must know I come from the great sea outside. In the hot times of the year, the people yonder go into the water. First they take off their scales, and then they swim. They have learned from the frog to kick out with their hind legs and roll with their forepaws, but they cannot hold out long. They want to be like us, but they cannot come up to us, poor people. And the fishes stared. They thought that the whole swarm of people whom they had seen in the bright daylight were still moving around them. They were certain that they still saw the same forms that had first caught their attention. The pretty bauble with spotted skin and an invariably round back declared that the human fry was still there. I can see a well-set-up human figure quite well, said the bauble. She was called Contumacious Lady, or something of that kind. She had a mouth and staring eyes like ours, and a great balloon at the back of her head, and something like a shut-up umbrella in the front. There were a lot of dangling bits of seaweed hanging about her. She ought to take all of that rubbish off and do as we do. Then she would look something like a respectable bauble. So far it is possible for a person to look like one. What's become of that one whom they drew away with the hook? He sat on a wheelchair and had paper and pen and ink and wrote down everything. They called him a writer. They're going about with him still, said a hoary old maid of a carp, who carried her misfortune about with her, so that she was quite hoarse. In her youth she had once swallowed a hook, and still swam patiently about with it in her gullet. A writer? That means, as we fishers describe it, a kind of cuttle or inkfish among men. Thus the fishers gossiped in their own way, but in the artificial water grotto the laborers were busy, who were obliged to take advantage of the hours of night to get their work done by daybreak. They accompanied with blows of their hammers and with songs the parting words of the vanishing Dryad. So, at any rate, I have seen you, you pretty goldfishes, she said. Yes, I know you, and she waved her hands at them. I have known about you a long time in my home. The swallow told me about you. How beautiful you are, how delicate and shining. I should like to kiss every one of you. You others also. I know you all, but you do not know me. The fishes stared out into the twilight. They did not understand a word of it. The Dryad was there no longer. She had been a long time in the open air, where the different countries, the country of black bread, the cutfish coast, the kingdom of Russia leather, and the banks of eau de cologne, and gardens of rose oil, exhaled their perfumes from the world wonder flower. When, after a night at the ball, we drive home half asleep and half awake, the melodies still sound plainly in our ears. We hear them and could sing with them all from memory. When the eye of the murderous man close, the picture of what it saw last clings to it for a time like photographic picture. So it was likewise here. The bustling life of day had not yet disappeared in the quiet night. The Dryad had seen it. She knew thus it will be repeated tomorrow. The Dryad stood among the fragrant roses and thought she knew them and had seen them in her own home. She also saw red pomegranate flowers like those the little Mary had worn in her dark hair. Remembrances from the home of her childhood flashed through her thought. Her eyes eagerly drank in the prospect around, and feverish restlessness chased her through the wonder-filled halls. A weariness that increased continually took possession of her. She felt a longing to rest on the soft oriental carpet within, or to lean against the weeping willow without by the clear water. But for emerald fly there was no nest. In a few moments the day had completed its circle. Her thought trembled, her limb trembled. She sank down on the grass by the bubbling water. "Thou wilt ever spring living from the earth," she said mournfully. "Moisten my tongue, bring me a refreshing draught." "I am no living water," was the answer. "I only spring upwards with the machine wills it." "Give me something of thy freshness, thou green grass," implored the Dryad. "Give me one of thy fragrant flowers." "We must die if we are torn from our stalks," replied the flower and the grass. "Give me a kiss, thou fresh stream of air, only a single life kiss." "Soon the sun will kiss the clouds red," answered the wind. "Then thou wilt be among the dead. Blow away, and as all the splendor here will be blown away before the year shall have ended. Then I can play again with the light loose sand on the place here, and whirl the dust over the land, and through the air all is dust." The Dryad felt a terror like a woman who has cast asunder the pulse artery in a bath, but is filled again with the love of life, even while she is bleeding to death. She raised herself, tethered forward a few steps, and sank down again at the entrance to the little church. The gate stood open, lights were burning upon the altar, and the organ sounded. What music! Such notes the Dryad never yet heard, and yet it seemed to her as if she recognized a number of well-known voices amongst them. They came deep from the heart of all creations. She thought she heard the stories of the old clergyman of great deeds, and of the celebrated names, and of the gifts that the creatures of God must bestow upon posterity, if they would live on in the world. The tones of the organ swelled, and in their song there sounded these words: "Thy wishing and thy longing have torn thee with thy roots from thy place which God appointed for thee. That was thy destruction, thou poor Dryad." The notes became soft and gentle, and seemed to die away in a veil. In the sky the clouds showered themselves with a ruddy gleam. The wind sighed. "Pass away, ye dead now, the sun is going to rise." The first ray fell on the Dryad. Her form was eradicated in changing colors, like the soap bubbles when it's bursting, and became a drop of water, like a tear that falls and passes away like a vapor. Poor Dryad! Only a dewdrop, only a tear poured upon the earth and vanished away. The end. So this was quite a longer one. Yeah, I hope you liked it, and please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up before you leave, and please write me a comment down below if you liked it, and what do you think was the point of this story? Does it have some morale to it? I would love to hear what you think. Yeah. What do I think? Maybe it's to take for granted what you have and not to wish for more. That what you already have is enough. I don't know, maybe. Let me know down in the comment what you think. And yeah, and remember, if you aren't already subscribed, please subscribe down there. I would love to have you. Especially if you like this one, I'm pretty sure you will like my channel. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye everybody. Love you.